Diablo 4 is Blizzard's upcoming new action RPG. It's being marketed as a more accessible path of exile, meaning it's going to lean into deep skill trees and strategic options, specifically builds and itemization, and hopefully is going to be a more casual version of that, so more accessible for players looking to get into the genre or otherwise wanting to get involved with it. Has no pay to win. It's going to be microtransaction for cosmetics only, and it's going to feature a season system, which is supposed to be a in-game incentive for players to re-roll characters, think of new builds, and otherwise engage with seasonal content, which is going to add a lot of replayability for those of us interested in playing this game long-term. My projected score before playing the game at all was a B. At the minimum, I'm expecting a well-polished, casual action RPG with a AAA budget and seasonal patches. Blizzard's pretty well known for taking a genre and polishing that genre, taking the high points of that genre and including that in their next game, which is basically the pinnacle of that genre most of the times when it releases. They've done this in the past with games like StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3. These types of games weren't particularly innovative in of themselves necessarily, but they took a lot of the great things of those genres and combined them into one game, which is awesome. It has Diablo 4 here has lots of hype and a lot of nice sounding descriptions, but this type of game is going to live or die by the end game. It needs to be accessible, fun to replay, and still have a deep strategy side to it. And I'm not 100% sure they're going to be able to deliver on that. So I'm dubious but hopeful, and I gave it a B before playing it. So after 30 hours of early access weekend gameplay, let me tell you what I like about Diablo 4. I like the AAA energy of this game. I like the fantastic cutscenes. I like that your character is in those cutscenes with its current equipment and current facial customization, that it looks like you in these cutscenes. I like that the character gets stronger over time and the items look that way. Your character looks more and more epic as you continue to accumulate more and more powerful loot. I like the pacing of the core gameplay loop. I like the grind, upgrade, specialize, and repeat. It feels like you're getting more powerful at a rate that is both fairly regular, but not so incessant that you're never stopping with that. You like and feel your upgrades when they arrive. I think the elites are pretty cool, especially as you start getting into multiple elites. It changes the way that you fight. You have to think about it for a second. It's kind of fun. And the mini bosses are really good. They feel different from the rest of the gameplay loop. So when you encounter these mini bosses, you really feel like this is the moment of the dungeon. This is the time where your character build is going to be tested, that kind of stuff. I really like that so far. I like that it's designed with small groups in mind. This is the type of game that is going to be really nice to have a clean system for just jumping in for a couple hours or an hour with a friend who wants to come in, who's at a different skill level or different casualness, and can jump in and be part of that. And it's easily accessible to do that with the game as it is right now, which I like. It's got a nice playground for optimization, right? Between the imbuing system, enchanting, upgrading, sockets, tons of different stats and tons of different keywords. I think this is all pretty good. I like the fact that you can search in your skill tree by keyword. So if you're trying to specialize on a crit build, you can highlight everything in your skill tree that interacts with crit as you start thinking about and planning your build. That's really nice. I like the idea, although we haven't seen the implementation of Paragon levels. At the moment, the skill tree, I'll talk about this a little bit more, doesn't seem super complicated to me, but the Paragon stuff, if it is particularly transformative, is going to be really nice with that. There's a lot of extra skill tree, quote unquote, that we haven't seen yet in the Paragon system. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I hope they do something like a wild card system for this. More on the skill tree later, but right now I do feel like some of the pathing makes it so that some of the builds aren't you can't make some builds because you just have to have too many prerequisites. It'd be nice to have some wild card skill points to assign wherever you want it with no prerequisites needed kind of deal. And I like that it has controller integration and cross-platform play. Again, I think this is one of these games that you're going to enjoy spending a little bit of an evening in casual gameplay with some of your friends, and having optimization for all the different systems playing together, as well as ease of access for multiplayer, I think is going to add longevity to this game. So all those things are great. That said, there's a lot I don't like with D4 as it is right now too. The skill trees were a letdown for me. I don't like some of the functionality of the skill trees. So for example, there's no preview. You're just, whenever you're removing a skill, you're removing it. You can't like map out a build first before hitting confirm. You can't have multiple save specs right now. I think these things really need to be in there. I think you need to be able to quickly change and navigate and play with these to have any fun with that. It's going to be a big part of the game, is engaging with the skill tree system. The tree is, I understood it to be more of a node system than it actually is. It is much more like a stacked set of nodes, like a vertical stacked set of nodes where you kind of need to progress down into those nodes to unlock things. That makes for less build diversity because you are forced to take prerequisites of a certain number in previous nodes before moving to the next node. And I think this is going to be an all-around negative. Again, wildcard points might help with that, but at the moment I was a little annoyed how restrictive it is. I think ultimates are a kind of bad concept. The problem is, if an ultimate is, as it sounds, a very powerful ability on a longer cooldown, you're pretty much required to incorporate these into your builds. And I'm really don't like the idea that some skills are a must-have in every build, or especially when there's not a lot of them. And there's only 3 ultimates at the moment. You kind of have to incorporate one of those into your builds. It's a big deal. It takes a skill slot of which you don't have that many, and it forces some commitment to that. Maybe there'll be builds that can avoid these, but at the moment they seem strong enough that you probably can't avoid them, and they seem to be by design intended to be included in all builds. Now, whether or not that's true in the long term, I don't know, but I don't like that as a concept. I want as much diversity of build as I possibly can get. I don't like heavy investment in passives that don't change core gameplay behavior. And there's a number of passives in these skill trees that are like that. For example, just passive elite damage reduction. It's a good stat, but it's a really, really boring stat. And if it's multiple points, if I have 25 or 26 skill points in the early access to work with, and 3 or 4 of them have to go into that particular point, and then 4 or 5 of them have to go into leveling my primary damage skill, that's 9 points out of my 26 points gone already, and I haven't even done anything yet. All I've done is said, here's my button that I'm attacking with all the time, and here's some passives. So rapidly, these expensive investments in passives that don't majorly change up the gameplay are really diversity killing in terms of builds and play experience, right? So I don't like that very much either. Moving on, I talked already about the levels of skills. I also don't like the limited selection of competitive skills in the abuse slots right now. So in other words, you get these aspects from legendary gear, and these often transform a skill slightly, and that's really cool. But it's often so transformatively powerful that that is the best thing you can have in that slot. I want that to be competitive, and maybe it will be as I unlock more of these. Maybe there'll just be a ton of these affixes or aspects that you can capture that you're going to be deciding between defensive versus offensive for these stats. But I often found, like, if I'm going lightning, every lightning skill, if I'm going ball lightning, every ball lightning skill that I could get as an aspect was more powerful than any other aspect I could get in that slot, which forces me to play that. I don't want it to be, you go lightning, this is the best build for lightning. I want it to be tweaking the type of build that you're able to do with that. I also found that the game seemed to reuse bosses and maps more than I would have liked. This adds to the kind of overall samey feeling of this game, and there's a lot of things playing into that. One, as you said, the reuse of assets, also the reuse of the same fights. I like the idea that these mini dungeons have unique different fights, and not all of them do. Some of them are using the same bosses. The color palette is super similar to me. It adds some problems sometimes where it's hard to see abilities, but also it's just samey. It feels very monochromatic. It feels very similar. So it doesn't really give any sense of change or progression. And also playing into that is level scaling. Level scaling is a cool idea. It's basically the mobs are always relevant to you. So you can progress kind of in a natural kind of play of where you go. You can fight the stuff and engage with the content. You don't run into mobs that are super over leveled compared to you and just crush you, or mobs that are super low level and then therefore not worth anything and not fun to fight. But it also adds to this feeling of every place is the same as every other place, because you have no reason to go to a specific area. It all drops roughly the same loot and everything is scaled to your level. So why are you moving to any particular location? Maybe they could fix this for certain areas, dropping certain affixes on weapons or gear or some version of that. But at the moment, it just adds to that everything feels samey. And then finally in that category are the types of stats you can get on weapons. For example, let me give you just one small example of this. Let's say you're using a build that uses some sort of crowd control effect, like a slow, for example, right? Well, there's like 5 different affixes that can be used with slow. You can get damage from slow damage. You can get damage from crowd control damage, which stacks with slow damage, which is basically the same thing in that particular build. You can get damage from close range damage. So maybe your slow is a big hammer bash that's close range. Well, that's now also close damage. And you can get damage from like Vone damage as well. There's like 10 stats that all feed into the same thing. Now that's kind of cool in the sense that all these items are going to have things that are useful for, but there's probably going to be some breakdown of these stats. Like it's slightly better to get slow damage than crowd control damage because it's a higher statted item type, or possibly things like, just like this is all very similar. So if you pick up an item that's got 5 of one and 4 of the other, and you pick up another item that's got, what I say, 5 and 4, then 3, 3, and 3 of 3 other stats that all affect the same thing, it just starts to feel no different. So I didn't really like that. I wanted my stats to be more different than they were. Next thing. At the moment, everything the multiplayer aspects of this game added have been bad for the game. So the game was laggy in multiplayer areas as opposed to these small instances, which I preferred to spend my time in. So being around other players was laggy. The world boss experience was really unpleasant for me. The camera wasn't far enough zoomed out. You had it was a group of players attacking a world boss, but you had no connection to those players. I teleported out to repair my equipment mid-world boss fight and came back, and it brought me to a different set of players with a different world boss at a different level of progression for the fight. I never spoke to an entire player throughout the course of the entire early access weekend. I often encountered players for these kind of shared global encounters, but we never spoke, we never coordinated, we never interacted with each other because there was no need to do that. So it was kind of like almost like the illusion of multiplayer with none of the upsides of why you might want to do that. No social aspect, no actual cooperative aspect, with some of the downsides of doing that, lag and player congestion and that kind of thing, right? So I didn't like that multiplayer aspect as it's implemented right now. Some of the lag stuff probably gets fixed, but the rest of that seemed a little bit problematic to me. I don't like the price tag on this game. This game is $70 starting. I appreciate that there's going to be no microtransactions outside of cosmetic microtransactions, but $70 is a big upfront price. They are demanding you pay AAA prices for this, and I'm not totally convinced the product delivers yet. I'm not going to speak to the balance at all right now. It's too early. We're level 25 cap. The game is designed to be much further along the way than that. The replayability is all going to be in the late game. We just don't have enough information for that. Was there perfect balance at an early access patch? No, there wasn't. Certain classes seem better than others. Certain skills seem better than others. But again, this might kind of come out in the cards a little bit as we get to see the rest of the systems in play. And then finally, I didn't think there was enough polishing of the core systems from what I was expecting from this game. For example, you get a lot of loot in this game, and loot comes in multiple tiers. It comes in grays and whites, which you don't white loot at all. It comes in blues, which you maybe loot to sell, but you're never really going to get good stats on these. And then it comes in yellows, which are your rares, and your legendaries, which are browns, right? And you loot a million of these things, and a big part of the gameplay loot is categorizing and disposing of basically useless rares or keeping of rares that you're interested in. I would like to see this system done better. I would like to be able to highlight items on the ground that have stats that I'm interested in looking for. So maybe I could select critical chance or critical damage, and I decide that these items show up in a different way or sort in a different way so I can look for the types of things that I'm doing as I'm building a character, for example. These things would be nice because it's going to give you that dopamine hit of not only did you drop a legendary, but you can see that it's highlighted in some way, that it's got the stat on it that you're looking for, this type of thing. I just feel like there's missed opportunities for iterating on the genre. This is Blizzard. This is supposed to be the great things of this genre brought into one game and done really, really well. I'm not sure I've seen that for the loot system. And there's a big part of your life in this game is going to be replaying dungeons and accumulating loot. And I want that to be as seamless and as fun as an experience as possible for me because I'm going to be doing it over and over and over again. So after 30 hours of early access, my first impressions for this game are very similar to my predicted. I give this a B. This game is looking to hit the sweet spot between accessibility and depth, and I'm not convinced that the skill and itemization is there yet. I don't think the quality of life improvements were that great or successful. The overall game, it feels very similar from area to area, moment to moment, level to level, boss to boss. Right now, much too much of that, in my opinion. But all that said, I really need to see the end game. There's a framework here that could be translated into a really good game, I think. But it's really going to depend on those rest of those skills and that loop, what it looks like as you do the 50th repetition of this dungeon. Is it fun still at that point? Is the pacing of the upgrades, the epicness of the boss fights, the changing of the difficulty, the impact of the Paragon levels, is all of this going to combine to make the game fun across many, many hours? I don't know. And it's not like this is a $5 investment that you're just like, it's not a big deal either way. This is a $70 investment, 90 to 100 if you want to get in on early access a couple days early. And that's before any microtransactions for cosmetics. So maybe if you're playing this a lot, you might want to make your character look particularly cool, or get this awesome mount, or get this cool skin of a weapon. And if you're going to be adding to that already pricey tag, it's kind of a lot to ask for. So, I mean, fingers crossed. I hope this game is awesome. I hope when I do my next review video of this and I have many more hours in it and we've seen many more of those systems, I hope it's a bigger score. But right now, I'm not that convinced yet.